Good morning all, and good afternoon as well to our colleagues who are joining us, and welcome to our final session of the Global Ideas Exchange. So today we are hosting the Global Ideas Exchange Summit. I'd like to introduce myself first. My name is Sophie West and I'm the delivery lead for the KTN Global Alliance Africa project. As I mentioned, this is the final event of a 3-week event series. We're really hoping that this session will be highly interactive. So we really look forward to hearing all of your thoughts and questions for our esteemed panelists today. For those who are joining us on YouTube, if you would like to raise a question to any of our panelists or raise a comment, we really do invite you to put your questions or comments in the chat box at the side of the YouTube video, and we will answer them throughout the panel session today. Just to point out that as I'd noticed in the registration, this session is being recorded and may be used publicly. I'd first like to start this session by thanking our funders for the project. So the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy through the Global Challenges Research Fund, and our strategic partner Innovate UK. We've also worked in partnership with the South Africa Technology Innovation Agency, Co-Creation Hub Nigeria, Simulon Gong Hub in South Africa, AfriLabs and iHub, who have helped to put together this 3-week event series. So thank you all. First, I'd like to talk through the agenda for today's session. We will be starting the session with a welcome address from the KTN CEO, Alicia Greeted. I will then run through a short presentation to provide an overview of the series highlights. We will then bring in an esteemed panel for a panel discussion that will be moderated by Niju Tay of KTN, and our panel will form of Dan Detroit from DSI, Anna Akaledo from AfriLabs, Callum Hamforth of UNDP, Brenda Kabuki from ASEC, and finally Fidel Makatia from TBEvent Kenyatta. We will then close our session with closing remarks from Niju Tay. So firstly, I'm delighted to introduce Alicia Greeted, who's the CEO from KTN, to provide a welcoming address. So Alicia, I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Sophie, and welcome everyone. It's a really great pleasure to be with you all today. As Sophie said, I'm Alicia Greeted and I'm sitting here in Edinburgh, and it's really quite cold here, so I'm probably the only person with a jumper on, that hence the bad weather outside. Anyway, I've been Chief Executive at KTN for just over 1 year, and it's been such a privilege to take on this role. At KTN, our whole aim as an organisation is to connect innovators for positive change, and what better example than the Global Ideas Exchange series. And on a more personal note, I've spent a lot of my working life supporting and promoting international collaboration in research and innovation, and it's something that I've really enjoyed doing. I spent many of my years working overseas, and both my children are born outside the UK, in India and China. And the best part of collaborating internationally, I think you'll all agree, is friendship. It's learning from one another, widening our horizons, but ultimately making friends and working across the globe to share ideas, knowledge and cultures is the way that we together will come up with the solutions to the big challenges we face. So no time is more important than now, and I'm really, really delighted to have you all join us today for the conclusion of the Global Ideas Exchange series. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the experience we've had over the last 3 weeks, but before that, I'd like to stress that we remain very concerned by the violence that we're seeing in Nigeria, especially the reports of civilian deaths, and our thoughts are with all of those affected at this time. And I'm sure that's how everyone feels that's dialing in just now. So looking back over the Global Ideas Exchange, it's been an incredible 3 weeks. And even though we've not been meeting face-to-face, and we would love to be meeting face-to-face, but we've managed to have some really interactive and fascinating and inspiring experiences. We've had over 300 participants from around the world. I've got a big list of all the countries that have been involved, and we've had partners from our own partners in South Africa, Kenya and Nigeria, which has been great, but also speakers from South Korea, Singapore, the US, Canada, and Tanzania, Germany. It's a really, really long list, so I'm not going to read them all out, but what a great global effort. And we've shared experiences, exchanged ideas, and discussed ways to enable inclusive work together so that we together can keep innovation happening even when times are really, really hard. So this series was an amazing example of connecting for positive change and working together to make a difference. And over these discussions, we've strengthened our relationships with our partners in our own countries, which is great. But we've also been really glad to make new connections globally with a whole range of partners, innovators, industry, NGOs, academia, and the public sector, which is just really fantastic. And as I said, friendship and trust is what drives collaboration and really great working together. And this event, I hope you'll agree, has been the beginning of many, many new friendships. And I speak very strongly from KTN that we really look forward to developing these exciting conversations with you all over the coming weeks and months. And we've been really privileged to hear some incredible presentations, which will continue today, with a whole wide range of partners, including the UN Development Programme, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, the UK Kenya Tech Hub, and again, I could go on. These are just a few of the great organisations we've been working with. And really importantly, we've learned about the amazing work that's been done to support innovation and tackle the terrible impacts of COVID-19, both on health and the economy. And we're really feeling that, we've been feeling that for a long time, but we continue to feel that impact on society. And sometimes it's challenging times like this, a global pandemic, that bring us all together to do something really creative. And we've heard about a whole range of creative approaches and innovations during these presentations, including a brilliant example from the fashion creative at the Assembly Hub in Nigeria. And this was a team who were originally making fashion products. And then in light of COVID-19, they quickly changed their products to be making medical grade masks. How brilliant. And I've been told that apparently these are very fashionable medical grade masks, which makes it all the better. We've also learned about the TIBA ventilator team at Kenyatta University, a really inspiring story about a group of 16 students from different faculties who all came together to come up with this ventilator prototype that has now genuinely saved lives. These students are truly inspiring, and they're a perfect example of both innovation and resilience. And I'm really pleased that you will hear from Fidel Makatil later in the panel discussion. And while we're talking about Fidel, you can't see his face at the moment, but you will see it later. I'm really, really honoured and happy to share with you that Fidel was awarded 2020 UN Person of the Year yesterday. So how inspiring and amazing to hear all these stories, and congratulations to Fidel and his colleagues. So what's been really, really key over the last 3 weeks of discussions, and the most important thing about all this, is that we've learned something, and we've learned some really important lessons. We've been hearing from others, sharing diverse views, and that all allows us to think differently and challenge the way that we do things. And in our webinars, we heard about the really important role of working together, of innovation networks, particularly now in the current situation. And Toto Matsudiso, who spoke to you last week, stressed the importance around COVID-19 increasing the demand for innovation and entrepreneurial support. And looking forward, he was stating that we need to create and maintain the networks that we have. And we are all of us here are a really important part of that. And we have to make a real effort to continue to network very well. And international collaboration has also emerged as a key theme. And Susie Kitchens from the FCDO emphasised how building global resilience really needs us to work very strongly together internationally. And I'm sure everyone on this call will agree with that. So we've learned a lot, we've shared a lot, and at KTN, we are committed to working together to ensure that everyone is included in this process of sustainable economic growth. And the past year has highlighted to all of us globally how quickly, how completely our lives and the world around us can change. And as we plan for the future, the Global Alliance Africa will keep these conversations going. We will be feeding back our lessons and making sure that we're listening really carefully to those most affected and feeding those lessons and that knowledge into the shape of future programmes. And as an alliance supporting the recovery of innovation systems from COVID-19, we want to build back together, we want to build back stronger and drive positive change for inclusive growth. And I really look forward to working with you to do that. So to conclude, we're absolutely delighted with the level of engagement over the last 3 weeks of this Global Exchange Ideas series. And thank you so much again to all of our speakers and all of you as participants for your enthusiasm, your honesty, which is really, really important, and for sharing your experience and knowledge so openly. And I'll reiterate what Sophie said, and thank you to all our supporters, the FCDO, BASE, GCRF, and of course Innovate UK, to whom we are very, very grateful. And we now have a much clearer route forward in planning our future activities. So thank you again for joining us today. I hope you really enjoy the rest of the summit. It looks like a great day today, and I look forward to hearing your questions and comments during the upcoming panel session. So I will feed back now to Sophie. We'll hand you back to Sophie, who will introduce the next part of the day. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Alicia, and thank you for giving such a wonderful overview of the sessions for the last few weeks and where we go as a future together as part of this alliance. So I thought to complement the welcoming address of Alicia, I thought I'd just take you on a short journey to explain how we've got to sitting here today as part of the summit. So we started this journey a few months ago with a mapping exercise with our partners at the country levels to really look at the impacts of COVID-19 on the innovation ecosystems, with a focus on Kenya, Nigeria and South Africa, but broadened to some of the neighbouring African countries, and also drawing upon KTN's wider network to look for case studies and learnings from the likes of South Korea, Canada, for example. So as part of the mapping exercise, we identified 6 key challenge areas that form the basis of the Global Ideas Exchange. We identified value chain disruption, funding constraints, uncorded communities of practice as key challenge areas. We also heard of the challenges of innovation governance, data access, and connectivity infrastructure. So as a result, over the last few weeks, we started this Ideas Exchange with a 1 week of closed door sessions initially with government counterparts. And then over the past 2 weeks, we've had some really engaging discussions, as Alicia has mentioned, in these 6 thematic areas, bringing together global innovation ecosystem stakeholders to share lessons. Which then takes us to today's summit session. And as mentioned, the purpose of why we're here and the purpose of why we're holding this summit is to really promote inclusive knowledge sharing, drive innovation through a global alliance. And we really hope that through this Ideas Exchange series, we've formed a strong global alliance together and ultimately to build back stronger and together. So I just thought I'd go into a little more detail about some of the sessions that we held, particularly last week, and share some of the more detailed learnings from the session. So last week on Monday, we started with our multilateral finance options for innovation session, where we brought together UNECA, HDIF and the Global Innovation Fund, who all emphasised the importance of shared indicators, sharing impact metrics in order to generate more evidence and enable less onerous mechanisms to help funding and ultimately deliver value for money across the innovation ecosystem funding. Day 2 saw us host our blended finance session, which highlighted the importance of a coordination amongst the investment pipeline. We heard a discussion amongst IFC, AVPA and GSMA, who also discussed the importance of non-financial support to coordinate with the blended finance. So the importance of mentorship in particular to streamline innovators to be able to have more resilience to shocks such as COVID-19. On Wednesday, we held our open innovation session, and this was led with McKenna Arere from CLASP and George Kasombi from Kenyatta University. They highlighted the importance of forming working groups and platforms in order to really build trust and identify shared values so that we can work together and to improve innovation and strengthen the innovation ecosystems at the country levels. For our informal innovation session, we had speakers from UN Habitat, Reciprocity in South Africa and UCL through the COVID Action Fund, which is funded by the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. It was actually a really engaging discussion where all three speakers really were calling for the need to build evidence and promote visibility within the innovation ecosystems, really to promote and facilitate coalitions and strengthen the ties between local and national governments, civil society and public and private sector. And we heard some wonderful examples of support that the likes of the COVID Action Fund have been supporting over the past few months with their local production for local solutions call. On Friday, we formed a panel to talk through supporting multi-scalar linkages. So we brought in Safaricom, CC Hub and AfriLabs, who all emphasise the importance of bringing together stronger partnerships to unlock the system's full potential, both with a focus on urban as well as rural innovation. They all emphasise the importance of increased experimentation, evidence generation and knowledge sharing being critical to unlock not only the potential of the innovation ecosystems, but to build resilience as we go forward. So throughout all of this, we've really tried to capture those lessons as KTN so we could share those with you today. And we've been hearing loud and clear from all of you some really clear cross-cutting messages. One, the importance of building up non-financial resources for resilience, so really promoting targeted business support, the calls for mentorship and promoting stronger linkages between early and late stage funders, the importance of enabling local solutions to solve local problems, so the need for building and enhancing capacity of existing systems, generating a coalition of evidence and a shared mapping across the systems, and the adoption of a circular economy and distributed manufacturing principles. The third key message we've had, and this is where we really will drive forward with the KTN Global Alliance project and the mandate of KTN more generally, is the importance of networks and partnerships to strengthen linkages across and between innovation ecosystems. So we work in partnership to build trust between stakeholders, promote visibility, and most importantly, understand the needs of different stakeholders so that we can work together. And finally, the final message we've heard is the need for agility and flexibility that is going to underpin our new ways of working. As you'll hear from some of our esteemed panelists today, the likes of Fidel from the TEBA event team, Their ability to be agile and flexible and respond to a challenge in a matter of days has allowed for new pathways and platforms to promote rapid response and ultimately improve resilience across the innovation systems. They will highlight that the importance of partners and networks, access to data, business support, agile funding mechanisms, and ultimately better connections to suppliers are how we can drive resilience going forward. So I really hope that has provided a useful overview of our last few weeks as part of the Global Ideas Exchange. And I'd now like to hand over to Niju Tay, who will lead a panel discussion with our esteemed panelists today, really taking forward those cross-cutting messages we've received and promoting an engaging discussion for them. So Niju, I'll hand over to you.
Sophie, thank you very much, and Alicia, thank you as well for such a inspiring welcoming speech for us, Alicia. Thank you so much. Sophie, thank you. Everyone, good morning, good afternoon. I'm Niju Tay. I'm the head of the International Department at the International Development at the KTN, and also the project director for the Global Alliance Africa project. I'm extremely delighted to be welcoming such an esteemed panel to share their thoughts and continue this journey with us this next hour or so. So let me briefly introduce our panel members. So firstly, we have Dan de Tour. Dan is the Deputy Director General responsible for international cooperation and resources at South Africa's Department for Science and Innovation, or the DSI. We also then have Anna Ekiledo from AfriLabs. Anna is the executive director, where she focuses on aligning AfriLabs' vision of thriving innovation economies in Africa, which is driven by the power of the community. And Anna is based in Lagos, Nigeria. And then thirdly, joining us all the way from Singapore is Callum Henforth. So Callum is a thematic lead for the digitization and smart cities at UNDP's Global Center for Technology, Innovation, and Sustainable Development. And Callum brings with us wide-ranging background with a strong expertise in driving digital and innovation in international development. And we have then Brenda Kibuku, the head of programs at ASEC, which is the Association of Startups and SME Enablers in Kenya, and which has a role to support local startup and SMEs, linking enablers or entrepreneurship with the right resources to support their entrepreneurship journey. And finally, we have Fidel Makatia, who is a final year student completing a BSc in Electrical and Electronics Engineering at Kenyatta University. And as a lead inventor of the Tibervan ventilator, Fidel has shared with us last week his amazing journey as a young innovator responding to the COVID-19 ventilator shortage in Kenya. So welcome everyone, and welcome such a wide-ranging, and experienced panel members to join us today. Really would like to start by picking on some of the key highlights that Sophie talked through with us just now. And it come across really loud and clear that international innovation support should aim at enabling Pan-African networks more effectively. Now, if we could start with Dan and with your perspective as part of the national government, as well as maybe we follow up with Anna with a view on working within a Pan-African network organization. I was just wondering, how could international partners currently working bilaterally can be more effectively support or fit into Pan-African initiative in tackling the current pandemic impact to our innovation ecosystem? Dan, could I start with you? Perhaps what are your thoughts on how we could encourage more effective international innovation support?
Thank you so much for the question. Really good question. And just to say a quick thank you to Alicia. Really appreciate your acknowledgement of what's happening in Nigeria right now. And thank you, Sophie, for the background, and just, exciting to see all the progress and all the previous discussions over there. days and weeks. Okay, so well, I would highlight 3 areas in terms of how the international community and how bilateral agreements can better work with the local innovation ecosystem. So just to give a brief background again, AfriLabs is a network of innovation and technology hubs across the African continent. We currently have 225 members across 47 African countries, across 102 African cities, all working with various stakeholders to support local innovators build successful businesses that would, create solutions across various sectors, create jobs, create wealth, and generally add to the social and economic development of the African continent. Now, I would highlight 3 areas. Of course, there are many ways which we've discussed, at the start of this session, but 3 areas I would say are key is 1, data and research. I think before any initiative, for example, is being embarked on, it's important to understand the particular problem that we're looking to solve, whether it's in a particular sector, if we're dealing with healthcare or education, or a particular situation, emergency situation, for example, this year with the COVID-19 pandemic, or whatever location we're dealing with, whether it's a particular city on the continent or country or region or just Pan-African wise, it's important to carry out the research. Unfortunately, that is something that we still grapple with on the continent. And I know it's not just in the African continent. Data isn't as readily available and as widespread as we would like, those of us in the development sector across the world. But then having partnerships that take on that approach of identifying the problem at the very basic level. So we don't always have to carry out widespread, expensive research, but just, sitting with the direct people or communities that are affected by the challenge that we're trying to solve goes a long way into creating an evidence-based solution. Now, the next thing I would say is working with the local communities to co-create the solutions. That is so important. First, doing a mapping of what's available on ground. Is it effective? Is it not effective? Is it something that we could take solutions from other locations to adapt and make the existing solutions better? Whatever the case is, a human-centered design, as previously mentioned, is very important in creating this solution. So that co-creation is quite important. And then lastly, measurement and long-term impact. So I think we can comfortably say that we have graduated from just measuring outcomes in the innovation ecosystem. I would say innovation ecosystem, which is where AfriLabs operates in, to just measuring outcomes of, how many technology devices, for example, were deployed, or how many people went through a capacity building program and all of that. But we can now say that it's time to move to measuring long-term impact. How are we directly impacting lives? So if we're talking about education, and I'll probably talk about that in another later on, our 8-year program, the EdTech Hub, is that we're not just going to measure EdTech solutions deployed in classrooms, but we're going to see how over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, it significantly improved learning outcomes of marginalized children, for example. So that's those are 3 key areas I'd like to highlight as a start.
Anna, thank you. That really resonates very well with with the remit that we are on, especially around the co-creation element and long-term impact and legacy. Really comes with us actually. Dan, any thoughts from you, Dan, as the as somebody working from the federal from a government
Yes. Thank you very much, Nitu, and thanks again for the opportunity to participate. And again, our congratulations to KTN and its partners for organizing this very vibrant and very useful knowledge exchange. So I will complement what Anna said, and as she said, look at it from a government perspective, and perhaps focus at the heart of the question which you had put to us, and how can partners, international partners who are currently bilaterally engaged, perhaps better coordinate and join their efforts as part of multilateral programs.
Yeah.
I think the first point to emphasize, having had a privilege to be involved in African science and innovation initiatives now for many years, several, that never before have we seen such a vibrant and a diverse landscape of different initiatives and programs seeking to reinforce Africans' innovation capacities, building international partnership. So the first point, I think, would be to see that where appropriate, we focus on reinforcing existing initiative and building, strengthening existing programs. There's sometimes a danger in the international partnership scene of perhaps, to use the old cliche, reinventing the wheel or starting initiatives which are already being taking place elsewhere. Of course, the innovation works in a dynamic and in disruptive manner, but I think nevertheless the need to focus on and have a critical mass and build on existing capacities is very important. So when we speak about Pan-African networks and Pan-African programs, secondly, I think from an international partner perspective, it's very important, and I'm speaking to the converted here, but nevertheless it should be said that we look at initiatives which are truly African-owned, and in which Africa itself is also invested. And certainly that from a government perspective is very important. At a level of our established regional initiatives, such as the African Union, the African Union's Development Agency, or the NEPAD, there are a number of programs being launched which has that political commitment and political investment from African governments. And again, as I've said, diversity is a strength. There should be different types of initiatives and programs, but it's also very important for, we would think, in the interest of sustainability, for international partners to complement and join forces with African governments in some of those existing programs. Again, everyone on this call would be familiar that of good initiatives we've seen over the years, but become exclusively dependent on support from an international partner and donor. And when that support is withdrawn, those initiatives also sadly die. So I think from a sustainability perspective, the active involvement and not only involvement, but co-ownership and co-investment by African governments is absolutely crucial. Then when we speak about coordination of partners bilaterally engage with multilateral in multilateral frameworks. Now, of course, as so-called donor coordination has been is a historic topic within the field of development cooperation. And I think everyone can subscribe to its objective, to its ideals. It can ensure a greater impact because a more efficient investment of resources. It can avoid duplication, but it's sometimes more tricky to achieve in practice because all international partners have their own sort of drivers for investment in cooperation. Whether you're the UK government or the French government or the Chinese government or the Canadian government, there are often different political and economic drivers which inform the design of specific programs and support programs. And to be a bit provocative, if one then goes into the multilateral context, then often you would find that those drivers are perhaps becomes less pronounced, which means that the partners are also less involved, and then you may end up with a program which is multilateral but it's actually quite watered down because you had to bring it down to the smallest common denominator for everyone involved. So I think the challenge for us, certainly, let's look at coordination around joining forces, but making sure that the international partners remain as engaged, as committed, and as invested as they would have been in their own bilateral partnership. So this, how do we achieve that? It's exactly through what you are doing here today. It's through stepped up. It's through intensive discussions and engagement. And I think the responsibility which is on us in Africa is to make sure that we really have an agenda, that we have a partnership agenda which we put forward with African priorities clearly defined, which then becomes a framework to work with international partners. And then it's very important that those, whether it's public or private sector partners, that they also can achieve the objectives associated with their drivers for for cooperation. So it's certainly an objective we should work to. It's less easier perhaps to achieve than writing it down, but I think discussions and opportunities such as today is very useful for us to explore how that could be done. So I'll conclude for now with this. Thanks.
Dan, thank you, Dan. There's a lot there for us to unpack, and really for us there, really inspiring from your insights and from Anna as well. And we pick up from your two remarks is that it's really important for us to really understand and put the African's priority, to be clearly defined and at the forefront of international cooperations with really strong buy-in, commitment, and political investment from African governments or the local governments in terms of working with them. And also Anna really helpfully highlighted that we have graduated from the days of measuring short-term outcome. We should be focusing on long-term impacts, and it really aligns with what we're thinking on the long-term in terms of not just looking in the context of COVID, looking beyond the current response, but looking towards sort of medium to long-term resilience to future epidemics, for example. So really thankful. Really thank you for those for your comments. And also we heard in the last couple of weeks as well that funding has quite often been talked about or be seen as the best incentive to get people to the table, and as an important means to enable important work to happen. But we also know that funding can't be everything. With important work still needed to be done around capacity building, networking, cooperation, partnerships along this sort of innovation and investment chain. Maybe perhaps I could draw Brenda, maybe drawing on your experience supporting SMEs through the pandemic. What non-financial resources could be better tapped for the benefits of SMEs? And maybe, Fidel, I could come to you after Brenda. What kind of financial or non-financial support did you benefit from in your journey? And what would you ask from government stakeholders to formalize that kind of support in the future for startups like yourself or young innovators like yourself, Fidel? So Brenda, would you like to kickstart this conversation for us, please?
Yes, thank you very much. I think I'll just highlight what during this pandemic, how we're able to support SMEs through the network. And what we noticed was develop a centralized system of information of all opportunities out there to support hubs as well as to support entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. So we work with different partners to identify solutions that are already out there, both funding and non-funded, that could be directed to hubs and eventually to startups and to SMEs. So a centralized system of information removes the chaos and the clutter around what is happening, where is it happening, who is making it happen. That way it's packaged and consumable very easily to the hubs, SMEs and startups. Yeah. What we noticed was also to co-create solutions with the hubs. So we worked with government to have a hackathon on what is happening, what solutions is being developed and by whom. And this went on to feed onto the information, into the database information of the opportunities to support startups and SMEs. And this came later on where we now started looking at what solutions, tangible solutions can be directed or are being developed by innovators in the ecosystem to address COVID-19. And what was fascinating was that people were working together. Everybody was bringing in their strengths and creating solutions. We know there were hubs outside of Nairobi that were not, before the pandemic, were not involved in the activities of maybe what is happening in Nairobi. But now, because of the co-creation that we push, that, let's not duplicate solutions, let us build on what is already happening. We saw a lot of hubs that were not working together come together and co-create solutions. And also pushing for collaborations. We see that, for instance, we have members within the network that offer mentoring and capacity building. They were able to create solutions for other hubs within the network. So that just drawing solutions from the network and leveraging on each other's strength is something that has come a long way during before and even after the pandemic. I think on a national level, we are looking at how can government directly support SMEs and startups, and what role do hubs have to play in that? And we've had conversations with government on a national level. We have worked on a startup bill that directs solutions, non-funding solutions that would address and support SMEs, startups, and hubs during a pandemic. We've developed a code of conduct for the ecosystem that touches a little bit on some of the solutions that the different players, investors, development partners can play into creating a buffer for startups and SMEs during a time of a pandemic and even after the pandemic. So what was big for us was co-creating solutions together with the people that are affected, and it's almost a circle. So it's not top down, it's co-created with, this is the situation on the ground, this is the pain points, and this is where we think all of us can play together. I think I need to shout out AfriLabs. Anna has been amazing in supporting the hubs across the continent. We've attended capacity building sessions put together by AfriLabs. They have an amazing program that just helped our hubs to stay afloat during this period. So thank you very much, Anna, and all the partners that you work with. Yeah, thank you.
Brenda, thank you. That's really interesting, and really delighted to hear that, you know, you have seen SMEs coming together, co-creating, driving collaboration, and be able to support each other to mentoring and sort of, you know, other support in the journey as well. That's really exciting. And again, I agree with you. AfriLab, we work with AfriLab. We love working with AfriLabs. Fidel, how about from your side? And anything you would like to share with us, Fidel?
Thank you so much. Once again, thank you for this platform. I'm excited and honored to be featured in this platform as a panelist. So yeah, we received support from mostly when we started. The greatest support came from the school, this Kenyatta University, because we started as an idea and everything was still abstract, everything was still theoretical. So no one was actually willing to invest in anything that is not practical. So basically, we couldn't get any support apart from the school, and maybe because the school understood all the theory we had formulated and all the simulations we had done, because it's an institute of higher learning, of course, maybe. Later, when we got in, the school gave us support in terms of not necessarily money, but facilities, like gave us a space where we could convene. We were given actually the entire building, the Chandara Innovation Center, where we could convene, use any room we wanted, use any facility, computers, internet, to do research, use any kind of reading materials to get. There was also facilitation in terms of meals and also where to sleep. Of course, we didn't sleep there mostly, but we slept in the Innovation Center trying to crack the things which were hard by then. So apart from money, there's more things you can give, of course, more investment, which can be given to young people, especially guys with ideas, and they want to make it a prototype. That process is not easy because they need a lot of research and a lot of trying and error. Remember, we tried many times and it could work, but facilitation still came in. So later, after we did our prototype, we now started receiving facilitation from the government. We started receiving some in form of funding. In form of, there was the Kenya Bureau of Standards. They used to come and they gave us a standard for free, the standards for medical ventilators, trying to make sure that our ventilator reaches the standard. We work with their engineers and we work also with their medical doctors, the pharmacy and poison spot. So the government came in at a later stage, but at least they moved us from a prototype to a minimum viable product. Of course, the university also formed a team of mentors, a committee of experts, which professors from all sides of disciplines, engineering, medicine, pharmacy, nursing, and also including the humanities. sports science actually. So all-rounded support. So maybe for the government and any other person who are trying to support young people coming up with ideas and projects, maybe in future support like I think mostly because one of the greatest challenge we faced was procuring things because guys had high prices because of maybe COVID or because of something else. So maybe the government should try and maybe reduce tax on things that are made to manufacture other things in Kenya. For example, if you're importing something so that you can make something, it should be lower than importing something which is already made, so that guys can be encouraged to try and do these things locally, because some people do the cost benefit and see if I import it would be more expensive, why don't I just import the final product? So also the government should maybe open more, or even NGOs, maybe even the UN if it's possible, open maybe more hubs where guys can come with ideas, because most people out here want projects, not ideas. So maybe we can have hubs for ideas where guys can come with ideas and people can see if they can work. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Fidel, can I expand that a little bit in terms of, because being you are still in the process of completing your degree, engineering degree, and then this disruption from COVID compel you to really work very innovatively and work really, really hard on getting to this solution. What sort of support in terms of going forward now? You now have a product and you look at commercializing these, potentially, hopefully, successfully taking these to the market. From somebody who is relatively early in your professional career, right? What do you see as would be most valuable in taking you from being an innovator into an entrepreneur and potentially into a successful businessman going forward? In the future, going forward, what do you see would be most valuable to you?
Okay, let me talk in terms of the ventilator which we made. So it's a medical machine, so it's supposed to be used in hospitals. But we are not the only company, Tibavent. We're not the only people making ventilators. The other ventilators, although they are not made in Kenya, they're made outside Kenya. And if you look statistically in Kenya, last time I checked on April, there are only 500 ventilators, and the population is 50 million Kenyans, 47 counties. You see, we have an acute shortage of ventilators. So maybe the greatest support the government can give Tibavent team or any other people doing medical machines, because they're very critical care machines are very scarce in the country because they're very expensive. So people should seek first to source internally before they can outsource externally. So for example, if somebody can say, or the government can say, let's buy maybe 10 ventilators for each county, we have 47, so that we increase the number of ventilators in the county. It will be a great support to push this. First, it will push the Tibavent team ahead business-wise. And also it will encourage guys to start developing medical machines, so that, because they know the government will want to source machines, because one of the big 4 agendas is actually good health. It's actually part of it. So the government wants to source let's say, medical ventilators. That is, it will not go external, but it will actually source from internal. So I think looking for local solutions by the government will actually benefit local entrepreneurs and people who are starting off. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So Fidel, you're talking about potentially government be more proactive in the procurement system to look at local solutions, especially to support young startup and innovators like yourself.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fidel. I'd like to move on to our next part of our conversation, please, if that's okay. So over the last 2 weeks, we heard from Dan, we heard from Callum, and also Anna's fellow AfriLab board member, Takunda Chingonzo, who all spoke about the need to be agile when responding to crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic. And funding, open source data, human-centered design, I think Anna talked about that, were all listed as enablers to rapid response. But what came through really loudest was the need for stronger relationships and partnerships. And I think Dan alluded to that earlier as well. Now, in situations where there's really limited time for us to build new relationships, such as where we are in now, do you think it's possible for us to build trust rapidly for sustainable partnerships? And if yes, what do you think is needed? And perhaps does our increasing reliance on digital identity in sort of virtual working environment here hinder or enable us to help this? So I'm talking about how do we build effective relationship, trusted relationships in such a such as constraining time and at the moment. So I wonder who would like to start on that point. Perhaps Anna, can I come to you, Anna, please?
Yes, we can start. I can start. Okay. So yeah, there are quite a number of things that could just contribute to building, quick relationships, right? And one of it, I would say, and this is one way I'd like to say that as AfriLabs, we've really enjoyed working with KTN, is just clarity of vision and purpose, right? Especially when you're dealing with, quick and rapid response, because usually, in a lot of relationship building, in the innovation ecosystem or development work, there's that time, to go through a lot of meetings back and forth, sort of exploring ways of working together, right? However, in a situation where things need to be done quick, the clearer people are about what they want to achieve, the faster two parties can decide whether to work together or move on. And moving on is okay. It just means that we'll probably work together on a later date. So that's one. Another thing as well is just open communications, transparency, accountability. These are things that I cannot overemphasize. And to put it bluntly, there is a lot of non-transparency that happens in quite a number of relationships, right? One thing that I feel like a lot of organizations or parties driving bilateral or multilateral relationships have to come to a point to say, we're going to be as transparent as possible. We're going to share knowledge. I think that's another good experience we've had from KTN, because there's been a lot of situations. I'm sure Brenda can also speak to this. A lot of people come into the ecosystem, carry out all this data, do all the interviews. People spend man hours, submitting concept notes, sharing their data, sharing their knowledge, and it's their data, they're not being paid for it. And then after that, we don't see the results, which is quite excited. We're really excited to, share during our annual gathering, and even prior to our annual gathering, all the blog posts and all that came out of the AfriLabs KTN research. So that really is important. Now, when all these things are put in place, as well as accountability of funds. So if funds are involved as well, it's quite important for whatever party that holds the funds, either from a development partner. For example, 3 weeks ago, a week before our annual event, AfriLabs had its annual general meeting, and we literally just did a breakdown of our major funding streams and, what will be going to hubs and, because our hub members are our number one stakeholders, but also accounted for every international development funding that has gone through AfriLabs for the purpose of hubs, and all these are important in building, quick relationships, trust, and to get the job done as well, and also contributes to the effectiveness of the outcomes. Because if everybody's open from the start, and there's that constant communications, even when things aren't going right, these are relationships we've enjoyed, not because everything was perfect, but because at every point, even when it wasn't working out, we were open about it. I think all these contribute to building really good relationships quick, and sustaining the relationships over time.
Anna, thank you. That's really very nice. Thank you. Really sort of honest and open points about your experience. Callum, perhaps you'd like to come in from UNDP perspective, Callum, because you and your team work internationally across many continents, and some of the work that you do are fairly rapid. And I presume, I would imagine that the ability to build trust almost comes naturally in your line of work, Callum. Do you have any experience to share with us, Callum?
Definitely. I think historically, trust has always been difficult. So I think when we're trying to do this, the first thing we should be doing is stopping and listening. So actually understanding what the need is, and where we can actually add the most value. So Fidel, whether that is kind of working with governments to reduce barriers and taxation, or is it a case of providing a platform to innovators, crowding in other funds, crowding in other knowledge? I think often trust is broken, particularly from the international side, when we don't listen, when we just jump in thinking what we know best and thinking that we have the answer. And frankly, no one has answers to some of the challenges that we're facing now. We're all trying to figure this out together. So I think listening and being humble is, I think, a really important piece. Frankly, I can't echo Anna enough, and always impressed by the work of AfriLabs. But I think what's really important from my side, and what we try to do on my team, is try to actually have a kind of meaningful collaboration. And this is very much about understanding where we can add value, but also, to echo what Anna was mentioning, not being extractive either. So if we are doing anything from kind of data collection, building in a kind of basic feedback loop can go an enormous way to building trust. Trust can take many years to build, can be broken very, very quickly as well. So something that should be always front of mind, I think, in anything that we do. And that includes, as Anna mentioned as well, being open, being transparent, being honest, learning from mistakes, being honest when and being open when we've made mistakes, and learning from them as well. I think in the context of technology, there's also a more fundamental issue with trust as well, where increasingly we are seeing a lot of innovation being owned in large companies owned and based in the global north, and real risks that we repeat mistakes that we've done, particularly in things like data collection, where lower value initiatives are in the global south, and the higher value, the more innovative pieces are owned and protected and hidden away in the global north. And I think we need a very, very open relationship in terms of actually how we can build capacity and ownership in the global south. So it's not a case of, large companies regulatory shopping to find where they can collect data to build AI tools that are then sold and used in the global north as products using data collected from countries with no regulation. So I think building trust in tech is a hugely important piece. I don't think anyone has the answer for that, but I think we all need to be very honest, very open, very transparent in how we build these structures. And I think one of the things that myself, my team, hopefully the UNDP more broadly as well, is to also try to make those conversations as broad as possible. So when we talk about smart cities, these should be very global concepts. Standards should be developed everywhere with all people and all voices included, and then not, a conversation that we have in London, in Barcelona, in Singapore or New York.
Callum, that's really, really interesting, because I really resonate with your thoughts around being honest, being humble, and also have the ability to admit that sometimes we don't have a solution, and that's why not having solution underlines the need to work together, to share the result, to put our brains together. And I think that's really important, especially in the current time. Really like that. And Anna, thank you for sharing your thoughts as well. Really, I think there's a lot there that we could all be really honest and humble about, and sometimes not to let the good be the enemy of being perfect, really. So we just have to get together, have a try. Maybe we may not get the perfect solution, but let's make a start and be honest and humble in our journey of working together, and be transparent, as Anna said, be accountable with our roles and what we are trying to achieve here. And that builds on to Dan's earlier point about putting the objective and the right priorities, in this case the Africa's priorities, at the forefront of our collaboration. Really good synergies there. Thank you so much. I'd like to move on to the next question, slightly moving on to sort of digital technology, where we've seen that digital technology has played dual roles through the pandemic. Number one, in improving inclusion and reducing isolation. But at the same time, conversely, it also increased marginalization of those without reliable access to internet. Now, what barriers to engagement do we need to overcome to support more inclusive knowledge sharing and learning between stakeholders, particularly focusing on the informal or innovators who are off the grid? How do we work with them? I mean, perhaps, Callum, would you like, because Callum, you work across smart cities, as you say, at a global scales, and quite frequently in terms of in the urbanization challenges, you work with sort of off-grid communities. How do we and what are the barriers that we need to try to overcome, Callum, from your perspective?
So I think from my side, technology is very much just a tool in our toolkit. Sometimes it may be the solution, sometimes it may be a problem, as you mentioned, or it may be part of a solution. So I think very much going back to first principles, understanding, as Anna and others have mentioned, user needs, the needs and realities of communities, looking at the kind of human-centered design, the whole kind of user journey, to actually understand what value and where technology can or often can't play a role. Often technology is the easy bit, the harder piece is the behavior change, the organizational change sometimes that's needed around that as well. And I think more broadly as well, it's very much about kind of building the kind of data as well. So understanding what the kind of need and the priority is. We talk a lot about big data, but often it's a case of things like lean data. So very small scale surveys, spending time with people, again, to echo my earlier point, just listening to actually understand what the issue is or the problem is and what role we can play.
Thank you, Callum. Anna, anything from your side to bring into this?
No, I think you well covered. Thank you.
Yeah. Dan, from the government perspective, from some of do you see that this scenario in South Africa in terms of the sort of in terms of this disparity between the communities off grid and with reliable access, and how, if so, is there anything that you're doing from DSI to address that?
We still very much see that in South Africa, and as I'm sure everyone on the call many would appreciate, South Africa remains sadly one of the most unequal countries in the world. When we speak of our triple challenge, it's a challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And therefore, in terms of our science and innovation policy, one of the major new thrusts is what we call innovation for inclusive development, but it's also inclusive innovation for development. So we have dedicated programs, notably some very interesting partnership initiatives with India to support our grassroots innovation communities, and make sure that when we speak of a national system of innovation, I mean, the temptation sometimes is for the policy rhetoric to focus on relations between universities, between public funded laboratories, between business, but that really becomes an inclusive national system of innovation, which includes these actors, which sometimes are not in part of the formal mainstream process, including inhibited by some of the infrastructure challenges. Colleagues have referred to that, but that's hard work. It means, as others have said, it means being attentive, listening, and then designing the processes and platforms which really enables co-creation, and that becomes then a big asset for the country, because there's enormous potential to be unlocked in what we refer to as our grassroots innovation community. And I think all the opportunities and challenges we've spoken about, both with regard to digitization and digital technologies, huge potential, but also a huge risk that it could further increase and widen existing inequalities.
So, and just to add to what Dan mentioned as well, and basically what every speaker has. Just to add to that, I think it's also important to note, and I think this is a realization that a lot of us in the ecosystem are also coming to, is that innovation doesn't necessarily always mean technology. So especially when we're dealing with marginalized groups, and especially when we're still looking to drive infrastructure inclusion, even to the farthest regions that don't have access to electricity or don't have internet access, or internet access is just too expensive for them to sustainably access certain services. One of the things we're doing more of is exploring other means of innovation, which is basically just a new way of doing something, or a new or creating a new solution to a problem, or adapting a particular solution in a way that can be scaled. This is something we're doing at the EdTech Hub as we look for EdTech solutions. What we found is during this COVID time, we had to, in an instant, after doing our research and everything, realize that in a certain region, for example, which we selected for one of our sandboxes in Uganda, deploying a fancy EdTech solution wasn't going to work. We had to deal with existing tools that were being used to teach students that were now out of home because of the COVID lockdown, which is basically radio. So doing a mix of radio and text and other educational materials and seeing how to scale that solution while we deal with the other infrastructural challenges of working with the government to provide technology to all the marginalized regions. So that's just another point to add, just being realistic about the situation on ground and working with that. We've also seen that during COVID and the use of hand washing machines that are not necessarily sophisticated and technology driven, but just, placing buckets and levers and, all of that, but have been effective, in curbing the spread of COVID-19. Yeah.
Anna, I agree with you, Anna, because it's about incremental and some small incremental innovation or existing solutions, existing behavior, existing models, existing technologies could potentially make a huge difference in certain communities. And I think so I think it's good that we have that in our horizon as well to be mindful that it's not always about mind-blowing innovation. It is sometimes small incremental changes could lead to huge impact. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for highlighting that, Anna. So that's really good. I would like to move on a little bit in terms of the other challenge that we've seen in our response that Sophie talked about a little bit in terms of supply chain or value chain disruption currently. And we also heard a lot of discussion on the need to enable local innovation to meet local challenges. And Fidel highlighted that earlier as well. And Fidel also talked about his experience of overcoming bottlenecks and rapidly making the best use of available local resources, such as from facilities, from accommodation, even at the university, raw materials, component supplies. Now, Fidel, you talk about that. And can you talk about how do you overcome some of these challenges, Fidel, at Kenyatta? Just very briefly. And then I'd like to bring Brenda into the discussion, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. So in any innovation process, there are challenges to be faced, especially if you're trying to do something which most people are trying not to do, that is innovating. You realize there are a lot of bottlenecks and challenges you'll face. But I think you don't lose sight of what you're trying to do, because like what I shared last time, I said we're trying to create a medical ventilator at a time whereby no ventilator company had made their design available or their documentation available. So you cannot reverse engineer anything. At a time whereby we didn't even know about how they usually work. I've never interacted with a ventilator by that time, so I didn't know, and my team members did not know. So we had to do everything from the bottom up. And later we realized there are some parts which are required for a ventilator, but it's not available locally. And the entire country was on a lockdown. So you could not get them anywhere or ship them from anywhere. So we didn't lose focus of what we were doing. We had to invent our own parts. Some of the valves we created ourselves. We used basic mechanisms to create valves. We use basic mechanisms to create pipings for the ventilator. And later we realized that it actually worked, and it actually enabled us to lower down the costs much. Actually, the TIPA vent is actually half the cost of other ventilators, because most of the solutions we need are actually locally available. So maybe mine is just to say that usually in this journey of what I've learned through the last 6 months about innovation and coming up with something new, there are a lot of challenges you face, but as long as you don't lose sight of what you're trying to do, and you once you try to invent or innovate, please, you give it your all. Because I remember for 3 days I only slept for 30 minutes. So there's a time I couldn't even stand, because there's a lot of things. Sleep was everywhere from my head to my toes. So because we all wanted to make it happen, at the end of the day, it was most important than even our sleep. So that's like I say.
Thank you, Fidel. Thank you, Fidel. Amazing journeys and amazing story. Brenda, in your your experience, how do you think this experience will be different for other startups working outside, and university incubation environment in Kenyatta that Fidel has just described? You work with a lot of startup companies, a lot of SMEs, and you've seen successes. At the same time, you will have seen some failures as well. How does your experience relate to Fidel?
I think Fidel, if where we're trying to go, or how we're trying to look at innovation and entrepreneurship, is to make sure that you get at least 8 hours of sleep. We want to equip you with the resources and the tools as you're innovating and creating amazing ideas, that you're also able to get 8 hours of sleep. So that is the vision, that is the plan that you're hoping to get into. So this pandemic was a first for Kenya. We've not struggled with anything like this before. We've been very fortunate, and we didn't see it coming. We didn't have structures in place to support entrepreneurs. We didn't know how to address. We didn't have a playbook on how do you support a startup during a pandemic. And now we know, and what is beautiful about Kenyans and the innovation space is they will always reference back to, during a pandemic, we did this and we did that. I just want to backtrack a little bit and mention that the first innovation hub in Kenya was formed almost 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the problems that they were addressing 10 years ago in 2010 are very different from the problems that they're addressing now, and the problems that they will address and support entrepreneurs and innovators such as Fidel. So we are looking at how can we support the next 10 years of an entrepreneur. And what we're looking to do is create a national framework through the startup bill that addresses who is an entrepreneur, who is a startup, what benefits can be directed for startups. Fidel can tell you that he needs at least 15 certifications to take his product to market. He needs to go to at least 15 government agencies to get approvals for different certifications. So we are looking to how do we remove those barriers for people like Fidel? Yeah. How do we give Fidel one room he can get in there and get his IP protected? He can be directed where to get a maker space that he doesn't need to, go 15 minutes or 30 minutes out of his way to identify a small makeshift person to create his path. So we are looking at a national level, how do we loosen and direct opportunities for entrepreneurs like Fidel? And the startup bill is looking to do that. And we have an innovation agency called Kenya Innovation Agency. It's been launched, I believe they've just had the first CEO. We are working closely with them to identify opportunities and support systems for entrepreneurs and innovators like Fidel. I think, Fidel, we need to have a conversation so you can tell us this, I want 8 hours of sleep and this is how you can make it, you can make it happen. I think also because of the way our government is structured and having 47 counties across the country, is if you're in Kisumu, if you're in Embu, if you're in Nairobi, you can go to the county level and get an incubator, an accelerator program. We have government agencies or government facilities such as Huduma Center that should be able to support entrepreneurs all across the country. So for us, we're really looking at a national level, how do we decentralize that support? So you don't have to travel, 8-7 hours into the city to get what we need. Is Fidel can operate and start his business in a town in northern Kenya. So we are really hoping together that the systems, the framework put into place, working with different agencies to really just close the gap with all that requires for one to set up and dissolve the entrepreneurship venture. So that is for us the next phase of level of support that we want to give the entrepreneurs for the next 10 years. So thank you.
And Brenda, I'm really delighted to hear that about your initiative in Kenya. And I was just wondering, Dan, whether do you have any perspective from South Africa to share with us, Dan?
Can certainly only agree with the comments which Fidel and Brenda just made. I mean, that has also been, from a government perspective, very much a priority focus for us over the past few months. It was not only how do we harness, how do we use science, technology, and innovation, to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, the objective now is actually it's the economic crisis. Yeah. But also, how do we make sure over the first 26 years of South Africa's democracy, we have been building and developing a vibrant innovation ecosystem, and how do we maintain the well-being of that innovation ecosystem? So, I mean, across the world, there's all countries look at special support measures to protect certain industries or businesses who see their business models now disrupted. For example, if you're in the cultural entertainment business or the restaurant business, we had special grants to support them. So it was also our role in the South African government to see that for our entrepreneurs, for our innovators during this different time, where the business models are disrupted, what special support programs they need so that we can look after them, because they're a very critical component of the capacities we have in the country. I think the point also to emphasize, I'm speaking to you, of course, from the Department of Science and Innovation. But in our government, there's a Department for Small Business Development, there's a Department for Trade and Industry and Competitiveness. So, and that becomes inter-government coordination between different government authorities and institutions. Then it becomes absolutely crucial. Specifically, if one is going to look at the infrastructure, regulatory, administrative challenges our entrepreneurs face, some of the challenges Fidel spoke about, that's often beyond the reach of the science ministry, so to speak. So what you need a consensus, you need a compact to support innovation and entrepreneurship, which becomes a national priority and which has the buy-in of all government.
Yeah, done. Thank you. I'd like to move on to the last, the next question. And in one of the key themes another key themes from this week's discussion has been around the importance of balancing competition with collaboration. I think Dan, you highlighted this as well in the session last week. Whether internationally in the context of international science diplomacy or sort of internal science diplomacy versus sort of innovation diplomacy that we talked about a little bit earlier last week. So we also talk about challenge-led open innovation initiative seen as increasingly used to enable specific practical solutions to tackle global challenges like the SDGs and now for the COVID pandemic. So a question for everyone, if that's okay, what open innovation framework need to be built, and which relationships should we prioritize to help build the type of coalition needed to support equitable partnerships in the future, in the current situation? What framework should we consider? What would be effective? And how can we be more open and better communicate what we need and what we can contribute to such initiative? So building around the open innovation model or the principle, how can we use that to build stronger relationship that prioritize supporting equitable partnerships for collaboration? And how can we be more open and honest in better communicating our needs and how we can contribute? Anyone would like to start? Callum, could I come to you perhaps, Callum, because you at the international level?
Nice, easy question as well. Thank you. It's a really tricky one. So I think to echo a point we've talked about earlier, I think very, very clear roles and responsibilities. So where can each institution and organization add the most value? I think what I've seen from some of the response we've had to the global pandemic is the role of things like global public goods. I'm a big proponent of open source. Actually, we were running an open source hardware innovation challenge, actually, where we had 400 or so fully fledged submissions, many from across the African continent and also Southeast Asia. And what really came out of this is just we're all trying to build sometimes the similar ideas or similar solutions, and we're making the same mistakes, or we're trying to do this together at the same time. So actually, there is a role for kind of open source and global public goods that others can replicate or build on very, very easily. But the other end of the scale as well, we need to make sure that we're not having open source that then conflicts with businesses and individuals actually building their own kind of organizations or careers out of this stuff either, particularly locally. So I think it's very much trying to balance and how do we create an innovation ecosystem locally.
Yeah.
I think one thing I would talk about in the sense of a kind of framework is when we talk about things like hackathons and so on in development, and Brenda made a great point around this earlier, they don't sit in isolation. It's not a case of you run a hackathon and then move on. And I think we've seen that quite a bit in the pandemic. It's very much how do you run a hackathon, but then incorporate that into your local ecosystem, the kind of support and reality available on the ground, amazing partners and other organizations that are available in the country or globally, and not just do a weekend of hacking and then move on to the next thing. It's very much looking at this in a very holistic fashion. I think that's something we've been trying to push as well.
Okay, thank you, Callum. Anything, Dan, would you like to come in?
Yes, I can agree with everything Callum just said, and it really comes down to having that clarity of the vision, of the purpose of the collaboration, and then if we look at the governmental level, also having that frank and open discussions.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, again, let me just, in the interest of conversation, be provocative. I mean, we sometimes propose a partnership with country X on a disruptive technology. Let's say artificial intelligence, and it has all the language about it being an equitable partnership and harnessing innovation for the public good. But if you just dig behind the surface, the partnership is all about just actually securing access to the African market for the AI applications developed in the country concerned. Now, that's not necessarily wrong. If I was working for the country concerned, I would also be looking for market opportunities for my businesses and enterprises. But let's have that discussion. Let's have that frank discussion, and all partners being open about what their objectives and their interests are. And then you construct a partnership around that. Because there are opportunities one can leverage by the interface between the research and the trade agenda. But I think sometimes because we skirt around the real issues, or do not perhaps want to confront some of the difficult issues, because as closer you come to market, there are sensitivities and it becomes difficult. But often parties are less inclined to address them, and we hide behind nice diplomatic words, and then we end up implementing programs, or we do the type of hackathon. I completely agree with Callum. I mean, over the past few months, we've seen so many hackathons. I mean, what happened with all of that? I mean, but it has created, and we often see it sometimes in innovation and entrepreneurship, where partners would run some kind of program, but all that program is a sort of event where people pitch and then they get some kind of mentoring, and then you see the same group of entrepreneurs going from one international mentoring competition to the other, but never exiting or never graduating. Because of those programs, because they've in a sense become an industry and a program in their own right. So I mean, I'm deliberately a bit tongue in the cheek and a bit provocative, but it comes down to what Anna and everyone else has said. Let's have clarity of vision, and let's have then an open and a frank discussion of the type of programs we want to build.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Really candid, honest, and open. I agree with you though. Really true. Yeah. Anna, any points from you, Anna?
Well, first to say, Dan, you're so on point. I mean, yes, just coming from the start and saying what the intention is just the way to go. You know, if you are looking for new market creating opportunities and all that, then it's fine. You know, there are stakeholders that would be happy to work with you and all that, but then riding on another, mission and getting people that are mission driven to achieve commercial goals, not the way to go. But then to add to what everyone has said, I mean, Dan and Callum have made really good points. I would say a framework, if you can call it a framework, that I've seen work over time is building a multi-stakeholder community of people that have the same vision towards and mission towards a common goal. You know, why I say multi-stakeholder is that when we're talking about open source technology, or we're talking about, open source or open innovation frameworks and all that, at the center of it, yes, we have our innovators, entrepreneurs. However, we also have our government agencies and policymakers that have a role to play. We have our international development partners that have a role to play. We have academia and research institutes. We have the corporate organizations that are interested in dedicating part of their resources, because with corporate, it's tricky, you know, there's a profit-making side of it that is just, you know, protect patented technology and everything, and then there's the open innovation. We have the innovation hubs, of course, that create this enabling environment and collaborative space that entrepreneurs can come and build their businesses, provide business support, legal support, funding, and all that. And of course, they're investors as well, that, again, impact-driven investors, to put it specifically, because that's a difficult conversation that also has to be made at the start. So once we have all these multiple stakeholders, you know, building a community around these stakeholders, communicating clearly from the start, and, you know, over time, we've kept reiterating the point over and over again in this session, the importance of open communication and all that. It goes a long way in building, being successful in the open innovation approach. And communities across board. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in one location, but then that knowledge sharing, and that's something that it basically makes up AfriLabs, right? AfriLabs is a community, and sharing knowledge within the various stakeholders really goes a long way in just exchanging solutions, exchanging information, building solutions that everybody collectively can benefit from. But if one has a different agenda, you know, which is more geared towards profit making and ownership of technology and as well, that is totally fine. I mean, we are also building successful businesses that would get acquired or go to be the next unicorn and all that. And parts of that would involve not open innovation actually, but, you know, protected patents. So as long as everyone is clear about what you're working towards, I think that's a model that would work.
Yeah, and I agree, and I fully agree with all the three the comments from the three of you. You know, trust, honesty, and openness and transparency are very key in partnerships. And ultimately, it is okay to have some commercial perspective or objective in partnerships, because ultimately, for example, one of our key long-term impact in Global Alliance Africa is about promoting job creation, inclusive job creation. And that has to come from successful businesses, or businesses become more successful, you know, in the next few years by creating more jobs. And that's fine. That's completely acceptable. And I really agree with you as well, you know, with all your points. Brenda, I just wonder whether do you have any perspective to share on this point?
No, I think all the other panelists have covered everything and said it so beautifully. So no comments.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, we'll move on to our last question, and it's an open question that I would like everyone's view. Now, with future resilience of innovation ecosystem in mind, can we identify a shared vision for how we think we should be working together? And what realistic expectation can we set in working towards that vision? So what is your vision, and what realistic expectation can we set? Right. I would like to hear from every panel member, please, if that's okay. Who would like to start? Fidel, can I be controversial and come to you from a young innovator's perspective? What is your vision?
Oh, sorry. So basically, before I answer that question, let me just say this. I was a student of history while in high school. I went through the 3 Industrial Revolution classes. I learned about from Agrarian Revolution to the 3rd Industrial Revolution. And I realized that in all those stories, there was no Africa in it. And there was nothing came from Africa, although that story. So I realized that also I read the stories of even people, stories of, for example, men who built America and men who did great things in Europe. I realized that there are people who decided to look within for solutions rather than doing it without. Then I realized that I can be part of the story the first pioneers of industrial revolutions in Africa. So my vision, actually, to answer you, is that my vision is to use technology and the knowledge of engineering to transform the lives of the people in Africa and in Kenya and Africa at large, then also help my country, Kenya, and my continent to be part of the story of the fourth industrial revolution. Yeah.
Thank you, Fidel. Anyone would like to share your vision?
Well,
please?
Permit me to share Afilab's vision, which is basically, yes. So Afilab's vision is an innovation economy, and an innovation economy in Africa driven by the power of our community, right? That's it. And that's what we basically, have basically kept reiterating the importance of community and all that.
Yeah.
But in terms of realistic targets, I mean, there are many, when we talk about the challenges we're trying to solve on the continent. One of the things that we'd like to see, for example, is seeing as many people, which is still a challenge, be as financially included as possible. So when, for example, we're working on supporting fintech solutions and building fintech entrepreneurs on a continent, we're also, envisioning a continent where we have more people that have access to financial services that can help their personal lives and businesses, and also across board. So when we look at education and healthcare, we're looking at resilient individuals as well, not just institutions, but to be resilient and to be healthy and grow as an individual, which contributes to the continental economy. We need healthy individuals. We need people that would have access to affordable healthcare. We need people that would have affordable, quality and accessible education. I mean, that ties into the SDG 4, but it's also one of our goals on the continent. And also seeing African-made innovative solutions everywhere in the world. I mean, we largely are still a whole lot better now. We're quite excited about the growth that's happened over the last 10 years. Yeah. However, we still consume a lot of Western technology and content and all of that, even in the creative sector. But what we'd like to see is our technology and our content and our solutions also being consumed in other parts of the world. And I don't think it's a case of competing against, market share. Yes, there's the commercial side of it, but then if we collectively as a globe drive more people to be financially empowered enough, or have access to technology, to consume innovation and innovative solutions across all sectors across the world, then there is room for technology to grow and scale from one region to another as well. So there's the development side of it as well, in just carrying the world along, and there's a commercial aspect of it, which I feel like African ventures can be immensely profitable by not just serving the African market, but also serving the global markets.
Yes, Anna, I have, without any doubt, I could say that I'm really confident that Africa as a continent would turn from a consumer technology into a provider of technologies in our lifetime. I think, I think it's a realistic.
Yes, to our lifetime.
No, Dan, your thoughts, Dan?
Yes, thanks. I will start with what you could say tongue in the cheek is the so-called motherhood and apple pie statement. But the vision we are firmly committed to in our policy documents is to make science, technology, and innovation work for a better South Africa, in a better Africa, and a better world. I think the key focus for us is actually to put that vision into practice. South Africa, and we admit that we have no shortages of good policies and good strategies, but it's how that then translates into concrete action, and that's really the directive for our government right now, is to make sure that this very strong and vibrant innovation ecosystem which we have is really put to work in an active manner to improve the quality of living of all South Africans. Of course, as an African government, we are proudly committed to Agenda 2063 and the Africa we want. But also there, the focus should be on our implementation. There's no shortage of rhetoric and policy statements on the role of science, technology, and innovation in Africa. But it's really time for African governments, all of us, to really meet up to those statements and take ownership. And because if one, for example, looks at the African Union, that's no secret that almost exclusively all of the science, technology, and innovation programs are still funded by donors. Of course, we are grateful for that support and that partnership, but we are not going to achieve the Africa we want if as Africans we do not start funding and owning truly pan-African programs. And I think very much associated to what Anna said, for very understandable reasons, when we speak about science, technology, and innovation in Africa within the context of global collaboration, the focus tends very much to be on the sort of the capacity element. How do we strengthen and how do we build African systems? And of course, we understand that, and that's crucial. But I really look forward to the day when we see Africa in its rightful place as an active partner, as part of the global science and innovation enterprise. And also the recognition of the rest of the world that whether it's climate change, whether it's COVID-19 pandemic, whether it's energy security, that also requires an African contribution to help us solve those global challenges. So thanks for that, Nitu.
Brilliant, Dan. Thank you so much, Dan. That's a really ambitious statement, and at the same time very inspiring, that we should, we're really looking forward to supporting the vision and the statement and the Agenda 2063. Brenda, could I come to you, please?
Yes, so I like what everybody has said, and I was looking yesterday at the median age in Africa. It's largely around in the early 20s, and I feel like that is represented here in terms of the spirit of what is happening in Africa, what the youth in Africa, what innovators like Fidel in Africa are looking to do, where they're defining the future for themselves, not just at a country level, but at a continental level. So at ASEC, we hope that we'll be able to equip the future entrepreneur to innovate and develop for Africa and for the world. I think it's necessary. I like that all the vision on this, at least just on this call, we're all aligned that we want to develop, we want to push and be part of the next and the next innovation space. So that for us, whatever role, however we play into that, however we're able to put structures to support the Fidels of Kenya and of Africa, we are aligned, and I'm looking to, co-creating and making history with all of us on this call. So in our lifetime,
yes.
what you're going for. So thank you very much.
Okay, that's brilliant, Brenda. Callum, I have deliberately bring you in last because I would like to ask if you could bring this from sort of a global perspective from your position at the UN. What are your vision and what sort of expectations could we set ourselves to be ambitious?
Thank you, Niju. I kind of wish I'd gone first, because there's no way I can top anything that has been said already, and I'm just in awe of being on this panel. From my side, there's two pieces I think that tie together. The first is very much trying to shape a global discourse around innovation. I mentioned at the start, I lead a lot of work around smart cities at UNDP, and often when we talk about smart city, it's a linear journey from where the city is now to Singapore, high-end, high-tech, and the other. And I think in a smart city context, it's about recognizing that every city is a smart city. So, for example, the role of nature-based solutions, indigenous knowledge, and also things like obviously tech and data. So I think firstly, broadening out that discourse, as Dan mentioned, is a really, really important piece. The second one is quite a personal one, and I've seen quite a lot in the COVID crisis, is that we build rapidly, we build quickly in crisis, but that's no excuse not to build well. And there are some non-negotiables and fundamentals that we can't steamroll over because of crisis. So things like human rights, data privacy, actually human-centered design and inclusion, and catalyzing local innovation ecosystems as well. There's no excuse, regardless of the crisis, that we can't listen to people, we can't be humble, we can't try to find out where we can add value. And I think that's really fundamental for me anyway, a kind of global perspective.
Brilliant, Callum. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm mindful about time, so I'd just like to use these last couple of minutes to say I'm really thankful, I'm really grateful, and really humble that you shared the time with us today. Really appreciate how honest and open these conversations have been, and I hope that we all will be able to take away some our mutual insights from this session. And from our perspective, really looking forward to carry on working very closely with you guys and everyone in the listening on the YouTube channel as well, to take some of these challenges that we set ourselves and the ambition that we have in working together more closely, in building back together. COVID has been unfortunate, but at the same time, it's given us the need to realize how important global alliance working together is essential in building our future resilience. So with that, I'd like to thank the panel members again, and I'll have a couple points to wrap up this webinar for us. So again, thank you, Anna, Callum, Brenda, Dan, and Fidel. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So in terms of want to quickly talk about some of the planned activities on the Global Alliance Africa. So following on our responses and our design, we are currently in the process of shaping essentially 6 planned activities starting from December this year, in looking at how do we strengthen the investment pipeline in the innovation ecosystem. How do you also focus on working with regional or local community to strengthen their place-based innovation ecosystem, and bringing together Innovation Alliance working together more closely, innovation enablers working more closely to be more effective in supporting startup and businesses, and also government agencies in the innovation agenda. And finally, we talk about a little bit on open innovation, and we're very keen to look at how open innovation could be better driven, more targeted in identifying medium and long, short-term and medium-term solutions in supporting the COVID recovery. We're also considering activities around knowledge exchange, facilitating better knowledge exchange for innovation governance in terms of policy making and implementation as well. So these are activities that we currently plan for the next few months, and I would like to encourage you to stay in touch with us through our projects. So please, come onto the website, look at our project, the details of our project, and also email us at globalalliance@ktn-uk.org and subscribe to our our mailing list, as well as please follow us on Twitter at @KTN_global. And with that, I'd like to just wrap up the session. And thank you all very much, and I hope you have enjoyed the last 3 weeks of the Global Ideas Exchange event. Thank you so much, and for all of us, thank you.